Now we're going to talk about some craziness. Oh, man. I never thought I would say this in the same breath, but it appears that Bernie Sanders and Ron DeSantis actually agree on an issue that could affect you, me, and all of us that are pro-free speech. And this is very concerning if you haven't been paying attention to what the Senate has just done in reference to resolutions. This is very concerning. So I'm going to let you know we're going to get the word out here. But first, I want to start with this interview of Ron DeSantis on Meet the Press. Now, I know it's all about Meet the Press today. She is questioning him about this decision or this sort of cancel culture that Ron DeSantis is implementing in Florida against the students, the student groups who want to protest in reference to stop the genocide and a ceasefire. Listen to this.
Well, let me ask you about some of the statements that you have made recently about those protesters. This week, you called for the banning of pro-Palestinian groups from Florida state colleges. Your Republican challenger, Vivek Ramaswamy, says that violates the First Amendment rights of these students. He writes, quote, "It's a shameful political ploy. It's unconstitutional. It's utter hypocrisy for someone who railed against left-wing cancel culture." What is your response to Mr. Ramaswamy?
Before he responds, I want to go ahead and say this. This is what I was trying to tell people last year about Ron DeSantis when they said that Ron DeSantis is against censorship. No, Ron DeSantis is against censorship that affects his interest. If it's an issue that is not affecting his interests or is not a part of his political ideology, Ron DeSantis is totally fine with censorship. He's totally fine with condemning free speech when it does not affect his political interest. Now, listen to what he says.
This is not cancel culture. This group, they themselves said in the aftermath of the Hamas attack that they don't just stand in solidarity, that they are part of this Hamas movement. And so, yeah, you have a right to go out and demonstrate, but you can't provide material support to terrorism. They've linked themselves to Hamas, and so we absolutely decertified them. They should not get 1 red cent of taxpayer dollars. And we also have strong laws in Florida against fundraising for groups like Hamas, and we are enforcing those vigorously. That's not a First Amendment issue. That's a material support to terrorism issue.
Yeah,
that is false. So let me go ahead and correct that here. I've been following the student protests, all of them in this country, internationally, etc. I have yet to see one student group say what Ron DeSantis just said. And Ron DeSantis is struggling here. I don't know what's happening, but it's very clear to me. It looks like Ron DeSantis needs to get some sleep because he looks very tired in this interview. I don't know if he's desperate. I don't know if it's despair. What is happening? But he does not look like he came prepared for this interview. Haven't seen any of that. Haven't seen any of that. This isn't the first time. I pointed out other examples where Ron DeSantis was totally fine with censorship. Totally fine with it. This guy is not to be trusted. And I know some people, for whatever reason, may have thought he's a better alternative to Donald Trump. I told you guys, this guy is worse than Donald Trump. Worse than Donald Trump. Wait for it, because it's not just him. Wait for it.
Just to be clear, you're citing the Florida law that says one cannot give material aid or resources to a terrorist organization. Do you have any support that they're actually doing that?
Their own words are saying they're part of this organization, that they don't just stand in solidarity, that they don't just support what they did, but that this is their movement too. So
pause. That's a lie. What the students have been saying is that they stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people. What Ron DeSantis is doing is he is trying to basically use the Hamas group and use that to broadly identify the Palestinian people. And there's a number of politicians that have been doing this. Nikki Haley has been doing. Lindsey Graham and his crazy ass has also been doing it. You know, Lindsey Graham's a flip-flopper anyway. He just goes where the wind blows. That is what the students have been saying. The students are not saying this. You got to ask yourself again, where does the money come from for these campaigns? Who is Ron DeSantis getting money from? Ron DeSantis is getting money from those Zionist groups. That's why he's saying the rhetoric that he's saying. So keep that in mind. So he's coming on here on Meet the Press, lying on these kids. These are kids. These are kids. And he's pro-war anyway. We've talked before about his time at Guantanamo Bay, which he doesn't want to talk about much. He doesn't want to talk about his experience as a JAG officer and what he did in Guantanamo Bay, how he was pro-torture. He don't want to talk about that. So he's going to be against anything that's like anti-war. I told you, he couldn't even make up his decision in reference to Ukraine. He tried to flip-flop, basically seeing where the wind was going with that one. First, he said, no, we still got to support them. Then he tried to flip-flop and say, oh, we should definitely start to end the support. Then he went back to, oh, no, we got to support them. He's just trying to move with whatever position that he thinks is going to be popular among his base so that he can get elected. He don't really stand for anything. He's just another politician in an expensive suit with nothing in the inside, empty in the inside.
Once you hitch your wagon to a group like Hamas, that takes you out of the realm of normal activity, and that's something that we're going to take action against. So we believe we're totally justified within the law, and I think things like this have been litigated time and again. But here's the broader point.
Let me ask you guys another question, and I'll go back to him. Sorry. Would Ron DeSantis be against groups like the KKK? Or the neo-Nazi groups in the U.S.? Would Ron DeSantis call for defunding of those groups in the state of Florida? No, he wouldn't. Pay attention, folks. Pay attention. Let's go back a little bit. King Grifter.
But here's the broader point. You know, are we just going to commit suicide as a country and let groups metastasize who are openly siding with brutal terrorist organizations? I don't think that's a recipe for a successful country. I want to have a country where we're protected from that stuff. Yeah. So I think we made the right decision. I stand by it 100%.
If you want to have a country, see, he tells on himself, if he wants to have a country where groups are protected from that, I go back to my other question. Again, would Ron DeSantis be against groups like the KKK and neo-Nazi organizations in this country if he cares about protecting groups of people? No, he wouldn't, because that doesn't suit his base. Now, to make things worse, Bernie Sanders. Oh, buddy, you got to see this. Bernie Sanders also wants to censor the student groups. Listen to this. This is reported from Michael Tracy. The Senate just unanimously adopted a resolution condemning pro-Palestine student protesters as in solidarity with Hamas and anti-Semitic. You see what they're doing? I'm going to get into more of this. You see what they're doing? They're basically trying to say, if you're protesting in support of the Palestinian people, that you're protesting in support of Hamas, which they define as a terrorist organization. The Senate is also explaining this as though Hamas and Palestinian people is the same thing. How would you guys feel if people in other countries pointed to certain groups in our country and said everybody is like that? Everybody is that group. You wouldn't like it. But this is what the Senate's trying to do. Let me continue. The resolution calls to fully and completely support Israel in its war on Gaza. Everyone from Bernie Sanders to Rand Paul voted for this. Everyone. So now Bernie Sanders is pro-censorship. Here are pieces that he pointed out, I think, that are important. Whereas students across the country have organized protests and vigils in solidarity with Hamas. You see what they're doing? This is what I was telling you. praising the actions of the terrorist organization and chanting anti-Semitic slogans. And whereas the director of the FBI has warned of increased threats in the United States by actors inspired by Hamas, now therefore be it resolved that the Senate fully and completely condemns the outrageous terrorist attacks by Hamas on the people of Israel, which resulted in the mass murder of civilians, including babies. You see what they're doing, right? You see, they keep trying to add in the babies part. Why don't they add in the babies part when they talk about the death toll of Palestinians? Why don't they add that in? Why don't they add in the babies part when they talk about the number of people who have died in Palestine, which Joe Biden claimed he didn't believe the death toll number? Why don't they tell you that the majority of people in Gaza are kids? Why don't they tell you that? Because they don't want you to sympathize with the Palestinian people. They want you to sympathize with the Israeli people. 2, denounces the rhetoric of anti-Israel, pro-Hamas student groups as anti-Semitic, repugnant, and morally contemptible for sympathizing with genocidal violence against the state of Israel and risking the physical safety of Jewish Americans in the United States. Let me pause there for a second. Notice again how they're defining it as pro-Hamas student groups. So as long as you are in support of defending the Palestinian people's right to self-determination, as long as you are speaking out against the occupation and the death toll among the Palestinian people, they're calling your student group as a Hamas support student group. This is what they're doing. This other piece here, they want to protect the physical safety of Jewish Americans in the United States. We're going to come back to that. Hold on. We're going to come back. 3, acknowledges that Israel has the right to exist and defend itself. And again, as I told you before, when they say this, in turn, what they are saying is that the Palestinians, whether it's Gaza or the West Bank, they don't believe they do have a right to exist, and they don't believe they have the right to defend themselves. 4, emphasizes that Jewish Americans have the right to safety and security in the United States. This is the part I want to touch on here. I think that all groups should have the right to safety and security. Problem that I've noticed, though, it seems like in this country, when it comes to our politicians, they only want to secure the right to protect certain people, if you know what I mean. Joe Biden signed an anti-Asian hate bill into law. I have no problem with that. I have no problem with protecting Asian people after they were targeted during the pandemic. And I saw some of these attacks happened on campus as well, so I'm familiar. I have no problem with them wanting to protect marginalized groups in this country. I have no problem with them saying that Jewish people also have the right to safety and security. My problem that I have is this. Where is the piece of legislation to offer safety and security for Black people in this country? Where is it? Where is it? They can't even pass an anti-lynching bill when it comes to Black people. When it comes to protecting Black people in this country, they don't pass legislation to protect us. And the legislation that they write up is weak, but they can't even pass the weak legislation. They don't want to protect us. They don't want to protect Black people in this country. If they wanted to protect us, and this includes the Democratic Party, instead of defunding the police, instead of trying to find ways to improve the criminal justice system, they actually sit there and give more money to the police. Joe Biden wanted to give more money to the police than Donald Trump did. They don't want to protect us. They don't want to. They don't care if we die. If they wanted to protect us, they would make sure that Black communities had clean water too. If they wanted to protect us, they They would make sure that what happened in Flint, Michigan would never happen to another community in this country ever again. And it continues to happen to other communities in this country. They don't want to protect us. They don't want to protect us from disease, from illness, from environmental pollution. They don't want to protect us from the racist police in this country. They don't care if we die. And I'm going to keep it real, unless you're part of like the black population where you already in with the wealth class, they don't care about the rest of you. So the Kamala Harris, the Barbara Lees, the Jim Clyburns, they're okay. But those people that I just mentioned, they don't care about us either. You think they care about working class black people? Jim Clyburn, poorest district in South Carolina, but he's a rich man. Now, you've been in office all these years. Why is everybody in your community still poor? They don't care. They don't care about us, period. And this is why I continue to say, stop voting for these clowns. To the entire black community, why you still vote for them? They put everyone ahead of you. And they never plan on getting to you. Never. And 5, encourages the United States government to fully and completely support Israel and its right to exist and defend itself. And like I said before, you never see them go this hard for black people in this country. Never. Everyone from Bernie Sanders to Rand Paul voted for this. Now, I told you, along with the cop city, and they're trying to build other cop cities in this country. They're already trying to in Baltimore. As I said, this would not just stay in Atlanta, along with the cop cities, increase the funding to police. They are trying to make it so that eventually in this country, they're going to try to make it to where you can't protest at all. And I say all parties, not just the Republican Party. You tell me how something like this, how does that protect Palestinian people in this country? Everyone keeps talking about the rise of anti-Semitism in this country. I'm not saying don't talk about that. But there's also a rise of Islamophobia in this country. And I saw this before after 9/11, and here we are again. But you notice you don't hear them talking about that. When they leave this out, it gives people the impression that the Palestinian people are not as important and that they should be devalued. Now, who else have they done this to? They've done it to indigenous people. They still continue to do it to indigenous people. They've done this to black people. They'll continue to do this. Now, The Intercept, they were on this very quickly. The Senate condemns student groups as backlash to pro-Palestinian speech grows. Notice how they phrased it. Notice how they didn't call it pro-Hamas speech, because that's not what it is. Listen to this. The U.S. Senate passed a unanimous resolution condemning what it called anti-Israel pro-Hamas student groups across the country following a day of walkouts. Hundreds of students, led by Students for Justice in Palestine and Jewish Voice for Peace, walked out of class at Columbia University, Princeton, NYU, and dozens of other colleges in what they described as a demand for a ceasefire in Gaza and an end to U.S. military support to Israel. Notice that they mentioned JVP, Jewish Voices for Peace. Some of the media personalities, they're even calling JVP anti-Semitic. Now, how are they going to be anti-Semitic and they're Jewish? Really? The Senate resolution condemns student groups for ostensibly supporting Hamas as part of a broader government and corporate pushback on protests over war. As the conflict intensifies, disputes are spilling over from campuses and government into many workplaces as well. Recent weeks have seen pressure by government officials against student activist groups, the creation of public blacklists in multiple industries, and a wave of politically motivated firings over people's publicly stated views on the conflict. Now we enter a new era of McCarthyism. This is why the censorship issue is important. This is why when we kept talking about Julian Assange, free Julian Assange, this is why that was so incredibly important, guys. You see what is happening now? They want to silence anyone that goes against the status quo. This is a very dangerous time. Coming after people in the workplace, not just the students. We are seeing people being fired from their jobs, being investigated by HR over their social media posts or conversations with colleagues, and having job offers rescinded. Let me say something here about this. So I'm a firm believer in what you do outside the workplace is your business. Now, a company don't have to hire you if they don't want to. Especially if you live in a state like mine, which is at will employment. They don't have to hire you. And they can also fire you for no reason in Massachusetts. But I've always firmly believed that what you do outside the workplace is your business. But I have seen over the past couple of years that there are some like coworkers, they go snooping around on other coworkers' social media pages, seeing what they're posting, reporting it back to management. Next thing you know, that employee's gone. This is also why I never befriended my coworkers. This is why. This is why we're not friends on Facebook. This is why we weren't friends on Twitter. This is exactly why. Oh, Sabrina, I sent you an invite request on Facebook. Oh, really? Yeah. This is why. And I will tell you guys too. Might not want to friend request your friends on Facebook and social media, like your coworkers. I highly recommend that you do not do that. Because some coworkers are snitches. And you might say something that they're offended by, and next thing you know, they tell the boss, and now the boss is mad at you, and we're going to have to remove you because of some of the things that were revealed on your social media. When the job is actually supposed to be about the performance that you're doing at work. Not what you do outside of work. But this is where we're at now. This is very concerning. Very concerning. And I told you guys again, I keep it real. People still send me those Facebook requests. And I'm like, I'm good, bruh. I am good. But we don't work together anymore. We don't. But I still don't trust you. Why you need to see? Think about this, guys. Why do your coworkers, especially if you're not friends, why do your coworkers need to see what you're doing in your personal life? Why do they need to see what you did over the weekend? Why do they need to see you going on vacation? I know people that have been fired before because they called out sick and then on social media showed that they were not out sick, that they were partying, stuff like that. Why do they need to see that? They don't need to know what's going on in your personal life. They don't need to know none of it. And people are nosy, especially some of the women. I tell you, I keep it real. Some of the women I've worked with are nosy. Oh, is that a picture of your family? Oh, where did you get married? Where did you da-da-da? I was like, God damn. Can't even have a picture up.